So, the internet is currently obsessed with the arrest of Ruby Franke, the mommy vlogger who was recently arrested for child abuse, along with her new business partner, Jodi Hildebrandt. Tons of people are comparing her to other infamous abusive moms like Lori Vallow, the Hart Tribe, and the Turpins. And yeah, there are some disturbing similarities. But I think the comparison to Lori Vallow is actually a lot more apt than most people realize. Because not only was Ruby a lot like Lori, but I think Jodi Hildebrandt was also a lot like Chad Daybell. Let us get into it. Hi folks, my name is Delaney and I'm a true crime writer and major murder nerd. On this channel, I like to take deep dives into some of the worst cases, and I tend to cuss a lot. So if you're into that sort of thing, go ahead and subscribe. If not, that's cool, you do you. So if you haven't heard about the Ruby Franke case, yikes, it's a lot. She ran a YouTube channel called 8 Passengers, basically a mommy vlog, where she exploited her children and gave ignorant parenting advice. But I repeat myself. Now, I don't want to get too deep into it since everyone and their uncle is already talking about it online. The gist is, on August 30th, 2023, one of her kids, a 12-year-old boy, escaped from the home they were staying in, Jodi Hildebrandt's house, and ran to a neighbor's asking for food and water. The neighbor saw how skinny the kid was and that he had duct tape and sores on his wrists and ankles and called the cops. When the cops arrived, they found another kid, a 10-year-old girl, who was also seriously malnourished. CPS took all 4 kids who were living in the home, the other 2 are adults, and arrested Ruby and Jodi. They were each charged with 6 felony counts of child abuse. For people who'd been watching Ruby's original channel, 8 Passengers, it wasn't a surprise. In fact, people had been trying to get her investigated for years. She was extremely emotionally manipulative and abusive to her kids, denying them privacy, isolating them, and even withholding food and basic necessities. There are a lot of videos and stories out there showing just how terrible Ruby treated her kids. If you want to take a deeper dive, Mormon Stories podcast has an interview with one of Jodi's earliest victims, as well as a panel discussion about how terrible and unethical Jodi's advice is. And of course, Law and Crime has a lot of great analysis on the case. Go to their channel and be prepared to lose an entire day going down that rabbit hole. Just to be clear, I have no credentials to diagnose anyone. I'm just some broad with a YouTube channel and some strong opinions. But from the clips I've seen online, it looks to me like Ruby was acting like a malignant narcissist. She had no understanding of child development, apparently because she expected the kids to behave like adults and take care of themselves because she couldn't be bothered. In her world, as the parent, she was in control of everything, and her kids had 0 rights to anything. Certainly not privacy, but not even food and shelter. The worst thing they could do was to inconvenience her. So if they got sick or had an accident, she would make them sleep on the bathroom floor so she could go back to bed. And sadly, that attitude is pretty common among a lot of fundamentalists. Just look at the Duggars or Michael and Debbie Pearl for examples. But I think what pushes her over the line from just narcissistic and neglectful to outright cruel is the way she would get upset and punish her kids for just being kids, playing a harmless prank, wrestling around on the floor, forgetting their lunch. It looks, to me, like she got angry whenever she saw her kids enjoying anything or having any fun. She would lash out and punish them with more isolation and withholding the privilege, as she and her husband called it, to eat meals or sleep on a bed. It really seemed to me that she enjoyed making them suffer, because when she would give out these harsh punishments on camera, she would smile about it.
My bedroom was taken away for 7 months and then you give it back like a couple weeks ago.
So we're gonna go.
I love that I can talk to my nephews that way. Get in line! Now go back to the back of the line. Get in line. Now go back to the back of the line.
Yeah.
Come on, you gotta earn your keep. You don't get breakfast if you don't massage my back.
You're so mean.
Okay. Get up there and scratch. 12-year-olds. I guess you don't get food today.
And I'll die. Yes, you'll die.
And this was before she got involved with Jodi Hildebrandt, but we'll get there. There have already been a lot of comparisons of her to other awful abusive families like the Turpins or the Hart tribe. The comparison to the Turpins is pretty surface level. They both had large families, and the parents isolated the kids, withheld food, and even tied them up. One brave kid escaped through a window and got help. But the Turpins weren't plastering their shitty parenting all over the internet, let alone claiming they could give anyone parenting advice. I think they were fucked up in a whole different way. And again, I have no credentials, but it looked to me almost like a hoarding situation. Kind of like animal hoarders, they were obsessed with having lots of kids, but couldn't handle actually caring for them. The Hart tribe is another comparison, mainly because of the way Jen Hart would plaster her adopted kids all over social media to paint a picture of this happy, loving family living the good life. But the Harts were putting up a false image of themselves and only mistreating their kids when the cameras were off, behind closed doors. And in the complete opposite of Ruby, neither of them wanted any sustained attention, like being a mommy influencer. The main comparison that most people are making with Ruby is Lori Vallow, and I think there's a lot more to it than most people might realize. Ruby absolutely sounds like Lori, not just in the awful shit she says and her connection to the Mormon faith, but her actual voice literally sounds like Lori's.
And Russell's bigger bedroom also had a bathroom. But what you guys didn't know was Chad didn't get any room. He didn't get anything. He was sleeping on the floor in the family room.
I taken my phone away from a 16-year-old boy before, and he's like wanted to kill himself because like they kidnapped him. That's how it was. It was like.
I made a video a while back talking about how Lori was probably a narcissist and terrible mom from the beginning. Link here and in the description if you want to check it out. I actually think Ruby was worse. Well, Lori seems to have emotionally damaged her kids because she was such a narcissist. I don't think she ever wanted to actively harm them. Well, up until the end there. She just put her own needs and feelings and delusions before her kids. Unlike Ruby, who seemed like she actually enjoyed making her kids suffer. And now, with a lot of the new info coming out, it's pointing towards an even deeper parallel with the Chad and Lori case. That is, if Ruby is the Lori, then Jodi Hildebrandt is the Chad. So, in Lori's case, she got involved with Chad Daybell, who was a sad little wannabe cult leader. I did a video on him too if you want to check it out. Link here and in the description. While Lori was already pretty narcissistic, Chad seems to have sort of enabled her into full-blown delusions of grandeur, to the point where she believed her kids were zombies who needed to be killed. With Ruby, she seems to have fallen under the spell of this woman, Jodi Hildebrandt. While Jodi might not be a textbook definition cult leader, she was definitely extremely influential in the Mormon community. She was seen as an expert by plenty of people and is actually a licensed clinician, although that might be changing soon. Where she starts getting into wannabe cult leader territory is the way she presented herself as a spiritual leader, someone who Jesus himself is working through to fight Satan. Only she knows the truth with a capital T, and only she can lead people away from distortion and into that truth. The LDS Church was also heavily promoting her to their members. She was invited, and presumably paid, to speak at various church events, like the BYU Women's Conference and different ward and state conferences. And, maybe not coincidentally, at a doTERRA MLM event. For a while, she ran an LDS-approved treatment center for sex and porn addiction, which isn't actually a thing. It's just religion-based sex shaming dressed up in clinical language. In 2012, her license was suspended because she violated HIPAA rules. The story goes, Adam Steed and his wife were referred to her by the LDS Church for marriage counseling, apparently because he'd committed the unspeakable sin of looking at porn and or masturbating. But after a while, Adam began to question Jodi's therapeutic methods and insist, rightfully, that he didn't have any addiction issues. He said, "She didn't want to talk about my personal goals or my progress. She would only threaten me that if I didn't take more sessions and have my wife take more sessions, the alleged addiction would destroy my life. After he started questioning her, he said she went on a mission to destroy his life, talking about his case and spreading lies about him to LDS leadership, BYU administrators, and community members. This led to him being ousted from the church and fired from his job. At the same time, Jodi started getting inappropriately close with his wife, employing her in the office while still acting as her therapist. Adam says that they ended up getting divorced. Hidden True Crime has a 2-part interview with Adam if you want to check that out. So her license was suspended for 18 months. During that time, the LDS Church said that they removed her from their referral list. But apparently, once she got her license back, she not only was reinstated on the church's referral list, she became their most referred therapist in that whole region. She was making millions of dollars giving marriage counseling, even though her own marriage had only lasted a year and a half, and during the divorce, she had engaged in a smear campaign against her husband, falsely accusing him of abusing her and their then infant daughter. You know, living in truth. Multiple people have come forward alleging that what Jodi did to Adam and his wife was really common. They said she would insist that the husband was addicted to porn or sex, again, not a thing, based on the fact that they had just watched or done it at all. She would drive a wedge between the couple, pushing the wife to separate from her husband and then get inappropriately close with the wife. Sometimes she would hire the wife to work for her or have her move into her home and just generally enmesh herself into the family in a way that no ethical therapist would even consider. But she wasn't just breaking up her clients' marriages. She was also being sent troubled children who she abused in ways disturbingly similar to what she's been charged with for the Franke children. Like I said, Mormon Stories podcast did an interview with one of her first victims, a niece that I'll link in the description. That niece described extreme psychological abuse, isolation, being forced to sleep outside in the winter, being duct taped, and withholding food as punishment. Anyway, Jodi later formed what she called a mom's support group called Moms for Truth. She later rebranded it as Connections with an X, where she's continued to spread her anti-science, anti-mental health, bigoted brand of therapy, calling herself a mental health trainer. From her website, I have counseled thousands of individuals and families of all ages and situations with my unique style of educating about the power of choice and the need for impeccable honesty, rigorous responsibility, and vulnerable humility. At some point, the Frankes were referred to her by their LDS bishop for marriage counseling. And it looks like it played out a lot like what those other couples said, because not long after engaging Jodi's services, Ruby kicked Kevin out of the house. Their house in Springville, Utah, which is where Chad Daybell was born and raised. And like she'd done before, she got way too personally involved with Ruby and the kids. She gave Ruby this bogus certification as a mental fitness trainer and put her on the board of Connections. She convinced Ruby to drop her extremely successful YouTube channel and start making videos with Jodi instead. In the last year, Ruby was apparently leaving the kids at home alone and spending most of her time at Ruby's home compound in Ivins, Utah. As the neighbors in Springville kept calling the police and CPS were starting to regularly visit the house, it looks like Ruby packed them up and moved them into Jodi's, which is where they had been held when the 12-year-old boy escaped. I think there's only a slight difference here with the Lori and Chad Daybell case. For Chad, I think having Lori was more about gratifying his own ego and sex drive, with the money she could bring to the table just icing on the cake. I think that while there might have been a sexual component with Jodi, it's been said that she hated men, and the way she gets so personally involved with her female clients has me squinting. For her, it was more about the money and power that Ruby could give her. Ruby, after all, had millions of subscribers and had made piles of money off her channel. By pulling Ruby into Connections, Jodi knew that most of her followers would come with her. Thankfully, Ruby's kids didn't end up like Lori's, but while the outcome for Lori's kids was obviously way worse, I think that on a day-to-day basis, Ruby was much more cruel and abusive and probably inflicted a lot more trauma. Also, I just want to add that the kid's dad, Kevin Franke, is just as guilty as Ruby. The fact that he hasn't been charged and he's only given vague public statements makes me think he's probably strategizing with his attorney for some kind of plea deal. Anyway, we'll see. So yeah, I see a lot of parallels with the Lori and Chad case. We had already pretty narcissistic moms engaging in toxic behaviors with their kids, to some degree, who then get involved with these narcissistic wannabe cult leaders, and the dynamic starts to look an awful lot like Folie à Deux, with their shared delusions spiraling into violence, destroying the lives of everyone around them. If you want to learn more about Folie à Deux, I made a video about the OG Doomsday Cult couple if you want to check that out. Here's the link. Anyway, this case has left me with a few takeaways. 1. I want to say this to all the moms and caregivers out there who watch these family channels on social media. I don't want to be judgy. I know how hard it is to raise kids in this country and how little support there is for us. I get the urge to want to reach out and find supportive communities online and to find some guidance and answers. But social media is not the place to get your parenting advice. Any idiot can call themselves a parenting expert online, and some of the shit they post is actively harmful and even abusive. If you're looking for advice, follow actual experts like pediatricians and child psychologists, not self-righteous blonde bitches who can't even put on fake eyelashes properly. Second, can we please get some laws passed to protect children on camera? How many stories of kids being exploited and emotionally abused for clicks does it take to get some protections in place, like we have for kids working in TV and movies? And finally, this case and so many others show that we desperately need some reform in CPS departments across the country. There needs to be more empowerment and enforcement tools for CPS so that they can do more than just leave a card in the door when kids are potentially in danger. But also, I think that the Frankes, like Lori Vallow and the Harts, benefited from several privileges, like being pretty, white, and rich, that let CPS workers give them the benefit of the doubt in ways that poor and non-white people would not have been given. In order to rein in this kind of bias, CPS needs to adopt some standard policies and practices designed to make evaluations more thorough and objective. If you suspect a child is being abused, please contact your state's DHS or call the national hotline number on the screen. One call could save a life. So that's all I have for this one. What are your thoughts about this case? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this kind of deep dive video, hit the subscribe button and consider joining my membership or supporting me on Patreon. You'll get early access to videos, bonus content, and free merch. The link is below. Till next time.